All right, so like I said, my name is James. I am a video production specialist here at Video Guys, and it is time for another Ask the Video Guys, where we take your questions and we answer them to the best of our abilities. If you have any questions about anything that we talk about today or just live streaming in general, here are the ways to get a hold of us. The easiest way is to give us a call at 800-323-2325. You can also send us an email at sales@videoguys.com. You can comment down below on either Facebook or YouTube if you're watching on one of those platforms, or you can add us on Twitter X at Video Guys. So if you have any questions, any follow-ups to any of the questions that we go over today, definitely feel free to reach out to us. That is what we're here for. Okay, so the first thing, and we get asked this a lot, is I am considering a multi-camera production. Will the cameras and audio be in sync? Well, first of all, let's talk about different ways that you can get video and or audio into a production system. And for the most part, when it comes to video, we're going to be either utilizing NDI, which is AV over IP, or some kind of baseband connection, whether it's HDMI, SDI, or USB. Now, when it comes to audio, there's a ton of different ways that you can bring audio into your production system as well. What we do here is we have wireless receivers and transmitters for microphones, and we actually just plug it right into the back of our TriCaster, and that's how we get our audio into our system. Some cameras on the market now have the ability to embed audio directly in, whether you're using NDI or again baseband, and that audio will follow your video. Another popular choice is using Dante audio, which is audio over IP. And then another very common thing to do is to take something like this focus right here or on the screen there, and plugging in multiple audio sources into that with a dedicated audio mixer, and then taking the master program out of your audio mixer and bringing that into your production system via either XLR, quarter inch, or maybe even 3.5 millimeter. Now, the first thing that I want to tackle is making sure that your video is in sync. So baseband, which is HDMI, SDI, USB, basically any point-to-point connection, is always going to have the lowest amount of latency. And again, that's because it's point-to-point. It is directly from your camera's HDMI or SDI output or USB output going directly into a production system. Again, a perfect example is in our studio, we're using a TriCaster TC1 Pro, which can use AV over IP, but it also has SDI ports on it. If you're looking at something like the TriCaster Mini X, that can also use AV over IP and HDMI inputs. So there are different solutions available for bringing in HDMI, SDI, or USB into a production system, and those will always have the lowest amount of latency. Now, we here at Video Guys are big fans of NDI, and in fact, everything in our studio is NDI based in terms of video, but NDI will inherently add a little bit of latency. And to make things even a little bit more confusing, different flavors of NDI will have different amounts of latency latency. So typically, full bandwidth NDI will have the lowest amount of latency, whereas every version of NDI HX will have a little bit more latency. And the reason for that is because full bandwidth NDI does not compress the signal. It just sends the signal from your camera to your network switch, and then from your network switch to your production system. So it's not compressing the video, but it does have to go through a few different steps. It's not a direct point-to-point like HDMI or SDI. But when you add NDI HX into the mix, well, then you are starting to compress the video. So your camera will compress the video, then send it to your network switch, and then from your network switch to your production switch, and then your production switch has to uncompress that file, and that can take 1 to 2 frames. to the naked eye, most people probably wouldn't notice, but once you start, again, syncing it with audio, then you can actually notice it. So our pro tip, just for syncing your video, is to make sure that you are using the same type of connection from your camera when it is facing the same subject. So a perfect example is here in our studio, we have two cameras. We have our main camera here. We're going to cut to this camera. And both of these cameras are utilizing NDI HX because we know that they're going to have the same amount of latency from the camera to the production system. And then we know when we're bringing in our microphones to delay our audio, and we'll get into that in a second here. And it doesn't matter what kind of source that you are using, whether it's baseband or NDI, just make sure that they're the same if they are going to be facing the same subject. Now, another perfect example of when you may be using, let's say, full bandwidth NDI or NDI HX for a couple of your cameras, if it's facing something else, it doesn't matter if that third camera is some kind of baseband, because they're not going to directly be fighting that lip sync issue. So, if you have three cameras in your main studio, but then you have a fourth camera that's in a different room, it doesn't need to be the same bandwidth because it's not utilizing the same lip sync issue. As long as that audio is in sync and this audio is in sync, that's what's most important at the end of the day. Now, let's say you are using NDI and you know that there is going to be a little bit of latency added from your camera to your production system. When you're looking at audio, audio is almost always going to be near instantaneous, definitely not noticeable to the naked eye. And that doesn't matter if you're using wireless transmitters and receivers, if you're using something like a dedicated audio mixer or Dante, it's always going to be near instantaneous because it's a much, much smaller file that needs to be sent. So then when you're trying to sync it up with video, what you can do in almost every production system on the market right now is you can delay your audio because you know your audio is going to get there first before your video, and you can delay it to match your audio. So even on the TriCaster, and I'm going to put Adam on the spot here a little bit, I'm going to ask him to show you what our TriCaster looks like right now. And he's going to go over to our audio inputs, and as you can see, that Rode mic is me right now talking. He's going to click on that gear, and as you can see, in the top right there, you have the ability to do an audio delay, and it is that simple. And if you are having multiple microphones coming in, you can get them all to match up. And the same thing can be, thank you, Adam. The same thing can be applied to something like even as a YOLObox Ultra. So now we're going to show you the YOLObox Ultra's interface. And I'm going to go, this is what the YOLObox Ultra is seeing right now. I'm going to go over to our audio tab here. And as you can see, I do actually have multiple devices connected to the YOLObox Ultra right here. And just to prove that you can change this on the fly, I'm actually going to turn off the audio that's coming in from our camera here and instead use this microphone that I have attached directly into the line in, or mic in on the unit. But as you can see on the bars here on mic, I have the ability to just simply tap the delay, and now I can delay this audio. Because again, my microphone is coming in directly through line in and with the microphone that's connected directly to the YOLObox, but we're utilizing NDI sources. So I know that there's going to be a little bit of a delay with my NDI video. So I want to be able to delay, maybe 100 milliseconds, my audio coming into the YOLObox Ultra. And so it's very easy to do audio delay. You just got to know how to do it on whatever production system you're using. Even something like Wirecast and OBS and vMix, all of these production systems allow you to delay your audio. So definitely make sure that you're looking into that if you are having audio sync issues. The next question is, and we get asked this a lot, is how do I get my camera in those hard to reach spaces? And a perfect example of that is if you wanted to rig a camera to your ceiling. Well, you're not going to be able to get a camera operator up there. So that's when NDI comes into play. You use one cable, as long as you're using a network switch that is PoE compatible, you can use one cable to get your power, your video, and your control to a PTZ camera, and just using a standard Cat6 Ethernet cable. And the other added benefit of utilizing NDI and PoE is these standard Ethernet cables can be run hundreds of feet. I think it's 100 meters, which is roughly 350 feet. So you can really get that camera very far away from your production system or your network switch and still be able to get control and video and power all through one cable. But as technology is evolving, especially in the world of AV over IP, we're starting to notice that Wi-Fi, wireless NDI connections are starting to become more and more popular. And this is especially true when you have a Wi-Fi network, but you don't, but you can't run a new cable, but it's an old building, but it does have power. So I kind of jumped around all over there. So I'm going to take it back a step here for a second. When you're utilizing something like a BirdDog X1 or X1 Ultra, like this camera right here, it has the ability to connect over Wi-Fi to send your video and your control back to your production system, but it still needs to be plugged into the wall. And that can come into play in older buildings like houses of worship where you can't run any new cables, but there are outlets available for you to plug the camera in. And then once you connect it, plug it into power, it can connect to the house of worship's Wi-Fi. And to show that like Wi-Fi is becoming more and more prominent in NDI, you can look no further than Netgear with their Pro AV line of network switches introducing wireless access points specifically designed for AV over IP. Again, knowing that a video signal, especially if you're going to be using more than one camera, you may need a bigger bandwidth than 1 gig. So these wireless access points go all the way up to 10 gigs. So you can get multiple cameras wirelessly transmitting back to your production system without any problems. And the beauty of this is now there's even ways to make a completely wireless NDI workflow. And a perfect example of that is the BirdDog X4. Now this is a 4K 60p camera. It utilizes NDI HX3, has a halo light, 3G SDI, HDMI, USB, Ethernet, and Wi-Fi, like we mentioned with the X1 and the X1 Ultra. But the X4 stands out because it has a built-in battery as well. So you can take this camera and run it off a battery for upwards of 6 hours. And this is perfect if you want to bring it to, like, let's say a sporting event. You don't have to worry about running any cables. You can put your X4 above home plate, bring your Netgear switch with its wireless access point, and rig that up relatively quickly. And now you have a completely wireless way to get your camera feed and your camera control back to your production system. And if you wanted to use a legacy camera, something like this camera or a cinema camera or a camcorder, you can also take either the HDMI or SDI out of that, plug it into a wireless NDI encoder, and then be able to still send your signal back to your production system. A perfect example of that is, let's say you're doing some kind of concert and you want to be able to get that camera operator to be able to walk through the crowd or up on the stage. Well, you can't have a cable running to that. So your camera can be some kind of camcorder, which runs on a battery. And then you can use these wireless NDI encoders, such as the KiloView N1 or N2, which are also battery operated. Attach that to your camera, and now you're sending a wireless signal back to your production system. And the same thing can be applied to the onboard monitors from Atomos with the Atomos Connect, which can connect to the Ninja or the Ninja Ultra, and the Shogun Ultra, which has the Connect module built in. And so now not only can you monitor what your camera is seeing, but then you can also send it back to your production system over Wi-Fi. So there are tons of different ways that you can get your cameras into not so easily gettable to places. So give us a call if you have any questions about a tricky spot that you need to get a camera to. We can find a way for you to get that camera and get that video feed back to your production system. Next up is another question that but our cameras split the files into multiple clips. Is there a way to record one long uninterrupted file? And the answer is absolutely yes. Now, we talk about the Atomos monitors and recorders all the time, and a lot of the times we're talking about their NDI features and being able to do ProRes and being able to monitor and give you, monitoring assisting tools like focus peaking and exposure tools and framing tools and all of that. And sometimes we forget to mention they are absolutely recorders as well. So if you are utilizing a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, then yes, a lot of the times the camera itself will be limited in the amount of recording for a single clip in the camera, utilizing the SD card or CF Express card that is built into the camera. A lot of the times it's going to have a recording limit of like 30 minutes unless you get a camcorder, which is designed to record indefinitely. But once you add something like an Atomos Ninja, Ninja Ultra, an Atomos Phone, a Shogun Ultra, or a Shogun Classic to your workflow, well, now you're just taking the HDMI or SDI video feed from your camera, plugging it directly into one of the Atomos monitors, and now you're recording to the Atomos recorder and not the camera. So you are no longer limited to the recording file size of the camera, but now the only limitation is how big of a memory card you have in your Atomos device. And these Atomos recorders can get cards that are upwards of like 4 terabytes. So especially if you're only recording at 1080 60p, you can record for hours and hours and hours and not ever have to worry about it. We did a video not too long ago on the Atomos Ninja Ultra and the Shogun Ultra, so I definitely recommend if you want more information just on the Atomos devices in general, check out that video. Now, what if you're using a switcher? We mentioned this at the top of the show that we're using in our studio a TriCaster TC1 Pro, and that has the ability to connect NDI devices and SCI devices to it. And most modern switchers have the ability to do at least some level of ISO recording. So I'm going to ask Adam again to bring up our TriCaster. And as you can see in the top right, there is a record button and a gear there. And if he clicks on that and then clicks on configure, you can see we are recording our master program right now, but we do have the ability to record 3 more mixes, and that can be any input on our TriCaster. So it could be an SRT input, it could be an NDI input, it can be an SDI input, doesn't matter. We have the ability to record that. And it's not just something that's limited to the TriCaster. Once again, the YOLOBox Ultra has the ability to record directly to it and be able to record ISOs to it, again, as long as you have storage. And that can be either an external USB drive or an internal SD card. It's not going to be limited to the camera's recording limit. It's going to be limited to the amount of space that you have. And the same thing applies again to Wirecast. With Wirecast 16, you can record ISOs on it. So you have the ability to record not on the camera directly. And if you are utilizing an NDI workflow and you don't want to record directly to your TriCaster or your YOLOBox or whatever production system you are using, you can look at something like the KiloView Cube R1, which is a dedicated NDI recorder, and it allows you to record up to 4 channels at 4K 60 or 9 channels at 1080 60. And the great thing about the KiloView Cube R1 is it records to hot swappable SSDs. So we're talking about The real limitation is going to be how much storage do you have? And because these drives are hot swappable, as many drives as you have and as much storage as you have on these drives, that's how long you can record. And these are also available in upwards of terabytes for the stick. So you can have two of them connected at the same time. Once the top one gets full, take it out, start recording on the second one, and it's hot swappable. So you can just keep going. So there are, again, tons of different ways that you can record longer than what just your camera allows you to record natively. The last thing that I want to talk about is when we have remote guests, and this is something that comes up a lot, is we do a lot of remote guests interviews, and our guests don't look good, they don't sound good. What are some of the things that you guys suggest to your guests? Because we do host a lot of people on our shows as well. And the number one thing that we're going to suggest is, especially if somebody's using a laptop, doesn't matter if you're using a laptop, connect it to a wired Ethernet connection. That will always give you the most stable and most reliable connection, especially if you are using something just like Teams or whatever. You want to make sure that your internet connection is as stable as can be. The next thing we're always going to ask them is to put on headphones, whether they are earbuds or muffs, doesn't matter. And the reason for that is we want to try and prevent feedback loops. If they're using, again, a computer or a laptop and our audio is coming out of their speakers, well, then their microphone might pick that audio up and send it back to us. And you may be thinking, oh, well, Teams and Zoom and all of these things have noise canceling protocols, and they do, but we don't recommend using them because a lot of the times it's very noticeable when it kicks on, and it can oftentimes cut off the first word in a sentence or the last word in a sentence when it turns off. So we don't recommend using that. We recommend just putting headphones in, and then you don't have to worry about it in the first place. The next thing, since we are continuing to talk about audio, is using an external microphone. Something as simple as something like the Rode Go2s that we're using here. They're relatively inexpensive, and you can even get consumer level microphones that are going to be leaps and bounds better than the microphones that are in your laptops. JLab is another relatively inexpensive microphone company that you can get super cardioid and cardioid microphones for less than $50. And they're going to sound way, 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 way better than the built-in microphone in your laptop. And the last thing is we're going to recommend using a real camera. Do not rely on the camera that is built into your laptop. It's a little itty-bitty camera. It's going to be really bad in low light situations. It's going to look really grainy, really pixelated. So if you have the ability for your guest to use a DSLR or a PTZ or a high-end webcam, again, that is going to look leaps and bounds better. And if you have the ability to, have an extra camera and microphone, then you can send that camera and microphone to your guest. And now with things like Bird Dog Cloud and NDI Bridge and PTZ Optics Hive Studio, you can send them a camera, tell them to plug it into power and connect it to the internet, and you will handle the rest, because now you can log in to that camera, you can position it, you can change the color exposures, you can change the frame rate, the resolution, and then maybe even set up an SRT feed back to your production system. And they don't have to worry about any of that. You're going to make them look good. You're going to give them a microphone, say, hey, plug this into the back of the camera too, and it's going to sound good. You're going to get good audio, good video, and they just have to focus on presenting whatever the topic is that you guys are talking about. So these are some of the tips that we suggest that you implement into your own workflows. Anyway, I went a little long today. My name is James. I'm a video production specialist here at Videoguys. I want to say thank you for watching with us. Next week, we will be joined by Kiloview. We are in the works right now to get some more information to bring to you about the Kiloview P3 and P3 Mini. So definitely stay tuned for that next week. If you have any questions at all, give us a call, 800-323-2325, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
Video Guys is available Monday through Friday. Give us a call at 1-800-323-2325. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram to stay connected with all of our updates. And you can like us on Facebook. Keep an eye out for our live videos, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.